I was restocking jars of homemade pickles under the shade of my stall's canopy when I heard the unmistakable clack of wedge heels on gravel. I didn't need to look up. That sound had already haunted my dreams for weeks. "Mr. Barrett Finley," came the sharp voice, "we need to talk." Immediately, I glanced up from my table of fresh produce and honey jars, wiping my hands on my apron. There she was, Wynona Dillard, HOA president, self-declared neighborhood guardian and certified menace. Her platinum bob was so stiff it might have been bulletproof, and her expression looked like she just smelled a dead raccoon. I sighed. "Wynona, you here to buy some zucchini or just ruin my afternoon?" She ignored the joke. "I've received several complaints about noise coming from this. Farm stall, music, talking, laughter. It's disruptive. This is a residential area, not a flea market." I blinked. "You mean the acoustic guitar and a few people chatting while they buy jam?" Wynona lifted her clipboard like she was holding the Constitution. "You're operating a business on HOA property without approval, and the noise levels are unacceptable. We'll be issuing a cease and desist." I chuckled. "You can issue whatever you want. I've got a conditional use permit from the county. The land's zoned agricultural residential." "I'm fully legal." Her face twitched. "That permit doesn't override HOA guidelines." I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. "Actually, it does. County law trumps HOA rules when it comes to land use. I already checked with a lawyer months ago. You should too." She wasn't listening. She was already scribbling something on her clipboard like she was casting a spell. "You'll be hearing from the board." "Looking forward to it," I said, already turning back to my jars. An hour later, a few neighbors stopped by. Word traveled fast on our street. "Hey, Barrett," said Tom, the guy from 2 doors down, holding a bag of okra. "Wynona stormed into the last board meeting screaming about your illegal produce cartel." "Cartel?" I laughed. "I sell beet jelly and goat cheese, not weapons." Tom grinned. "You've got half the block rooting for you, man. Let us know if she pulls anything shady." I didn't have to wait long. That night, someone filed a formal complaint with the county claiming my stall was attracting dangerous traffic and disturbing the peace. The signature line simply read, "W. Dillard." The next morning, an inspector showed up. He stayed for 15 minutes, drank a lemonade, and left with a bag of cucumbers. But Wynona wasn't done, not even close. 2 days after the inspector left with a grin and a bag of cucumbers, I noticed something strange when I opened the old barn that housed my coolers. The lock was different, not broken replaced. A cheaper model, hastily installed, and not mine. I stood there staring at it, my hand still holding the key that no longer fit. I called the sheriff's department. Deputy Langford was out within the hour. Tall guy, mid-40s, always looked like he was 5 minutes from retiring, but sharp as a tack. "Someone's been messing with your property," he said, squatting down to inspect the new padlock. "You're sure you didn't change this?" "Positive," I said. "This barn's got over $2,000 in tools and equipment inside. I'm the only one with a key." He nodded. "You mind if I cut it open?" I gave the go-ahead. He took bolt cutters from his cruiser and snapped the lock in one clean motion. The door creaked open. Inside, nothing had been stolen, but everything was rearranged. My feed bags were stacked against the far wall, my seed bins moved to the wrong corner, and a laminated sign identical to the ones the HOA posted near the clubhouse was nailed to the inside of the door. It read, "Unauthorized storage facility pending board review." Langford turned to me slowly. "You recognize this sign? It's from the HOA," I said, "but they've got no jurisdiction here. You got security cameras, only facing the front porch and the stall, nothing out back." He scratched his chin. "Might want to change that. In the meantime, I'll file a report for trespassing and unlawful tampering. Interfering with private storage, even if nothing's taken, carries weight." I nodded, jaw clenched. "You'll include that this was likely the HOA? "I'll write what I see," he said. "But if you get a name, bring it to me." That night, I drove into town and bought 3 motion-activated trail cams. By midnight, I had them mounted, one on the barn, one covering the side gate, and one aimed at the back fence. I didn't sleep much. I spent the early hours cataloging every tool and item inside the barn, photographing the layout, and backing up footage from the stall's old camera just in case. By Friday, I had 3 new customers ask whether I was still allowed to be selling produce. Apparently, Wynona had started whispering that I'd been cited by the county and was under investigation. One woman, Martha, who ran the quilting club, looked genuinely distressed when she asked if I was being evicted for zoning violations. I explained everything calmly, then handed her a printed copy of the county's conditional use permit. She read it, blinked, and asked for 2 jars of strawberry preserves. Saturday morning, I checked the trail cams. The one nearest the barn had caught something. At exactly 2:41 a.m., a figure in a hoodie and khakis scaled the back fence and approached the barn with a flashlight. They didn't go in, just stood there for a minute, then left the frame. The camera facing the gate caught the person leaving. The footage was grainy, but the profile was unmistakable. The sharp chin. The posture. It was Wynona's husband, Gerald. I printed the stills and took them straight to Deputy Langford. He whistled low when he saw the timestamp. Same time the lock was changed. All right. Looks like we've moved from trespassing to unlawful entry. He didn't break in, but he had no business near this barn. I leaned forward. If I press charges, what happens? Depends how far you want to take it. If he's acting on behalf of the HOA and they sanction this, could be considered organized criminal trespass. That's no slap on the wrist. Then I want it on record, I said. Every bit of it. Langford nodded. I'll bring him in for questioning. You'll likely get a visit from their lawyer soon. You ready for that? I've been ready since the day they tried to shut down my beekeeping class for unauthorized gatherings. The next board meeting was standing room only. Word had spread, thanks in part to Martha and her quilting club, who apparently had a group chat more active than a stock market ticker. I didn't plan to speak, but when Wynona opened with a statement about dangerous misinformation being spread by a certain resident, I stood up. I'd like to address that, I said. Wynona's jaw tightened. This is not the proper forum for personal disputes. Then let's talk about board conduct, I said, raising a manila folder. I have trail cam footage of Gerald Dillard trespassing on my property at nearly 3 in the morning. That's attached to a police report which names him as a suspect in unlawful entry. A murmur rolled through the room. Gerald, seated near the front, went pale. Wynona shot to her feet. This is slander. You have no proof of intentions. I have timestamps, and I've filed charges, I said. If the board sanctioned that break-in, you're all liable. I suggest you lawyer up. The room erupted. Neighbors were shouting questions, some furious, others stunned. The treasurer, a nervous man named Reggie, stood and raised both hands. I wasn't told anything about this. If someone used board authority to tamper with private property, we need to investigate. Wynona tried to regain control, but the room wasn't listening. Someone called for a motion to suspend her authority pending a formal review. Reggie seconded it. A vote was taken right there in the middle of the chaos. She lost. By a landslide. As people filtered out, several stopped to shake my hand. Even a few who'd previously sided with the board looked sheepish as they offered thanks. I didn't gloat. I just reminded them to watch their fences, check their locks, and read the bylaws for themselves. 3 days later, I got a letter from a law firm hired by the HOA. It was a cease and desist order. But instead of demanding that I shut down my stall, it warned me not to defame the board with unverified accusations. I sent back a copy of the police report and a signed statement from Deputy Langford. I included the footage on a USB drive along with a short note. Here's everything. Verified? I never heard back. By the end of the month, Wynona had resigned for personal reasons. Gerald faced misdemeanor charges, and the board quietly revised their code of conduct to require full votes before any enforcement actions. My stall stayed open, the laughter and music continued, and the HOA learned a valuable lesson. Don't pick a legal fight with a man who sells pickles and keeps every receipt. The town council meeting was already underway when I got there late, thanks to a flat tire I suspected hadn't happened on its own. That made 2 punctures in as many weeks, both on mornings when I had city business. I didn't say anything, not yet. But I'd already bought a set of trail spikes from a farm supply store. Let's just say if someone tried again, they'd find themselves limping home. The council chamber was packed. Not with HOA members this time, but with regular folks, teachers, postal workers, a guy who ran a small landscaping company, and even a group of teens from the local high school's environmental club. They'd been helping me with composting workshops and had apparently heard about some new ordinance the HOA was trying to push. I slipped into the back row. A woman from the City Planning Commission was at the podium, flipping through a file. "So to summarize," she said, "we've received a proposal from the Briar Glen HOA requesting a zoning variance that would restrict temporary commercial structures, specifically farm stands and roadside stalls within a half-mile of any subdivision entrance. They claim it's a traffic hazard and a nuisance." A man with a bushy gray beard stood up. "That's ridiculous. There's only one stall near that entrance and it's been there for almost 2 years now." The woman nodded. "Yes, the proposal specifically references that location, though it avoids naming the owner." I raised my hand. "Barrett Finley," I said as I stepped forward, "owner of said stall, and the target of what's become a months-long harassment campaign by a now discredited HOA board." She motioned for me to continue. "First, let's be clear," I said, placing a thick folder on the table beside her. "This is a public record of every inspection, permit, and legal document tied to my operation. I'm in full compliance with county and state law. Second, this so-called hazard is a gravel driveway on my own property. There's no street parking and I've never had more than 4 cars at once." The council member flipped through the documents. "You've already been reviewed by the zoning board, correct? Twice, both times cleared." A man in the 3rd row, Marcus, one of the newer HOA board members, stood slowly. "We weren't all aware this proposal was submitted. It wasn't discussed at any official meeting. I checked our minutes." That got a reaction. Council members exchanged looks. One leaned into his microphone. "So you're saying this was submitted without board approval?" Marcus nodded. "Someone used our letterhead and board seal. I don't know who, but it wasn't authorized." That was my cue. "I have an idea," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a printed photo. "This is from a security cam I installed after a series of property tampering incidents. It shows Wynona Dillard's personal assistant Janelle Havers delivering documents to the city clerk's office. I confirmed with the clerk that this was the submission date on the proposal." The room went quiet. The councilwoman at the podium frowned. She didn't identify herself as a representative of the HOA when she submitted it. "We assumed it was official." I nodded. "It wasn't. And here's the kicker: Janelle isn't listed as an employee on any HOA payroll. As far as I can tell, she's being paid through a private account." Marcus stepped forward again. "I'd like to request a forensic audit of the HOA's finances. If we've got off-the-books employees and falsified submissions, we need to know." The council chair nodded. "We'll open an inquiry." In the meantime, this proposal is rejected. As the meeting adjourned, a few reporters approached me. I gave them the same straight answers I'd given everyone else and directed them to the public records. I had no interest in becoming a local celebrity. I just wanted to sell my honey and heirloom tomatoes in peace. 3 days later, I got a knock at the door. It was Detective Roslyn Chen from the county's Financial Crimes Unit. She was direct, dressed in plain clothes, and carried a small recorder. "We've opened a criminal investigation into Briar Glen HOA," she said. "We have reason to believe funds were misappropriated and that fraudulent documents were submitted to a government agency. You've already been helpful, but I'd like to ask a few more questions." I invited her in, offered her coffee, and handed her a flash drive with the full set of camera footage, timelines, and scan documents I'd assembled over the past month. She scrolled through the files, pausing only once. "You cataloged everything, every suspicious visit, every odd transaction. I started the week they tampered with my barn." She leaned back, visibly impressed. "Mr. Finley, you've done half my job already." "I've had time," I said, "and motivation." She stayed for nearly 2 hours. When she left, I watched her car disappear down the road and finally exhaled. That weekend, the neighborhood was buzzing, but not in the way Wynona had once orchestrated. A group of teens built a sign for my stall. "Finley's Farm stand locally grown, legally protected." Someone else added a second sign beneath it, "Briar Glen HOA under new scrutiny." On Monday, the real fallout began. Wynona's name appeared in a county press release as a person of interest in an ongoing investigation involving forged municipal documents. Janelle Havers was arrested that morning on charges of wire fraud, impersonation, and conspiracy to commit forgery. She didn't resist. According to the deputy who transported her, she cried the whole way to the station. Marcus, now acting president of the HOA, called an emergency meeting. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. But I heard from neighbors afterward that the tone was different, less dictatorial, more conciliatory. They voted to suspend all enforcement actions until the investigation concluded. They also voted to allocate funds toward legal representation for homeowners who'd been wrongfully targeted. That night, I got a letter hand-delivered, not mailed. It was signed by Marcus and 3 other board members. "Dear Mr. Finley," it began, "on behalf of the reconstituted HOA board, we formally apologize for the actions taken against you. We acknowledge that your operation has always been in compliance with all applicable laws and that your rights as a property owner were violated. We are cooperating with authorities and assure you that all policies moving forward will be subject to community vote." I folded the letter and set it aside. I wasn't interested in apologies. I wanted accountability, and it looked like that was finally happening. The next morning, I added a new item to the stall's chalkboard menu. "Justice preserves blackberry jam with a hint of kick." It sold out in under 2 hours. Detective Chen returned a week later with an update. "We've traced over $25,000 in unauthorized spending tied to HOA funds," she said. "Personal expenses including a spa membership, furniture deliveries to a non-HOA address, and payments to Janelle under the guise of consulting." I nodded. "And the submissions to the city? Forgery. We've got enough to charge Wynona. She'll be arrested within the week." I asked what would happen next. "She'll face arraignment. If convicted, she's looking at prison time." "This isn't just mismanagement, it's criminal fraud, impersonation of public authority, and misuse of community funds." I thanked her. She paused on her way out. "You know," she said, "most people would have backed down. Instead, you documented everything. That's rare." "I'm a farmer," I said. "We keep track of things, especially the things that try to destroy what we build." That evening, Gerald's house went dark. A moving truck showed up just after sundown. No one said goodbye. By the time the county sealed the HOA's financial records and froze their accounts for audit, the neighborhood had changed. There were more porch lights on at night, more kids biking without glances over their shoulders. People started talking again, really talking. And as for my stall, it didn't just survive, it grew. I added a second table, then a third. Local artists started offering prints and pottery on weekends. A retired baker from 3 streets over began selling pies. We never called it a market, it stayed informal, neighborly, but everyone knew what it really was. It was a reminder that when you stand your ground and document the truth, even the most overreaching HOA can be brought to heel. And if they try again, I've still got the cameras. And now, a lawyer on speed dial. I was turning compost behind the stall when I noticed 3 unfamiliar vehicles parked across the road. All unmarked, windows tinted. One of the drivers stepped out, adjusted a dark blazer, and glanced toward the property with that slow, scanning look that said he wasn't here for produce. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked up the gravel path toward the front gate, where the man was already waiting. "Mr. Finley," he asked, flashing a badge. "Agent Rourke. I'm with the State Auditor's Investigations Division. We're requesting access to your surveillance archives for the period between May 1st and June 15th. I nodded once. "I've got everything on cloud backup. What's this about?" He lowered his voice. "We believe your footage may contain evidence related to a misappropriation case that just escalated beyond fraud." I led him to the back office, a small shed I'd converted into a workstation with a laptop, power bank, and backup drives. As I pulled up the files, he pulled out a folder and spread out several photos on the table, still shots of Janelle loading boxes into the back of a van, each one time-stamped. But one photo caught my eye. A fourth person, someone I hadn't noticed before, was handing her a sealed envelope. "That's not a board member," I said. "No," Rourke replied. "That's a contractor. His company received over $20,000 for landscaping jobs that don't exist. We confirmed he was paid through diverted HOA maintenance funds." He since flipped, said he was delivering cash under the table to multiple people. I sat down. So this wasn't just Wynona and Gerald, this was a full operation. "Looks that way. We're tracing the money. Your footage shows at least 2 exchanges happening on your street on HOA land. That makes it evidence of criminal conspiracy." Rourke took the flash drive and gave me a card. "We'll keep you updated. Just stay alert. People don't like being exposed." By the time he left, word had already started spreading. Not from me, I hadn't said a thing, but people saw the vehicles, the suits, the quiet conversations. And you can't hide silence like that in a small community. That evening, I noticed a strange silence at the Dillard house. The lawn hadn't been mowed, porch lights off, no car in the driveway. A neighbor walked by with her dog and leaned in. "They left this morning, didn't even say goodbye." I didn't ask how she knew. I just nodded. 3 days later, the state attorney's office issued a statement. The Briar Glen HOA was under active investigation for laundering community funds through fake vendor contracts, falsifying board votes, and tampering with county zoning documents. The charges named 4 people: Wynona, Gerald, Janelle, and a third man, the former HOA vice president, who'd quietly resigned 2 months earlier citing stress. The next week, subpoenas were issued. A formal state oversight committee took temporary control of the HOA's financials. All enforcement actions were frozen indefinitely. Marcus came by that Saturday as I was setting up the new rainwater catchment system. He looked 10 pounds lighter, like someone had finally cut the anchor off his belt. "I'm stepping down," he said. "Not because of guilt, just... This mess needs someone who can rebuild it. I'm not that guy." I offered him a glass of cold tea. He took it without speaking. "The new interim board?" I asked. 3 volunteers. One's a retired accountant, another's a history teacher. "The last one, get this, is a community mediator." He shook his head. "They're actually listening to residents, holding open forums. For once, nobody's getting fined for wind chimes or sidewalk chalk." "Progress," I said. He nodded. "You know, I never realized just how deep they were in. I thought it was just Wynona being overzealous. But this," he waved vaguely in the direction of the neighborhood, "this was a racket." "Why do you think she fought so hard to shut down a farm stall?" I asked. "It wasn't about the noise, it was about control." "If they could shut me down, it proved they could shut anyone down." He winced, then stood. "You ever run for HOA board?" I laughed. "Not in this lifetime. Maybe you should. We could use someone who keeps receipts." The following Monday, I received a formal request from the state auditor's office. They wanted to cite my documentation procedures as a model for private property owners dealing with HOA overreach. I gave permission with one condition: that they also include a section on community resilience, because none of this would have worked if people hadn't started talking to each other again. If Martha and her quilting club hadn't made flyers, if the teens hadn't built that ridiculous but awesome sign, if neighbors hadn't started showing up to meetings, this would have ended differently. The first week of July, I hosted a block-wide cookout. Not a fundraiser, not a protest, just a celebration. We hung paper lanterns, strung up lights along the tree line, and set out folding tables covered in checkered cloth. Everyone brought something: smoked ribs, peach cobbler, grilled corn, mac and cheese with a secret ingredient no one would admit to. Halfway through the evening, a man from 2 streets over raised a mason jar and cleared his throat. "To Barrett," he said, "for proving that you don't need to yell to be heard. Sometimes you just need to be the guy who keeps showing up." I didn't say anything. Just raised my jar and clinked it with his. Later that night, I stood at the edge of the field, watching the last of the kids chase fireflies. Lights flickered across the grass, laughter drifted in the breeze, and somewhere down the road, a door slammed as someone headed home. The HOA still existed, technically, but it had been rewritten, its power cut, its bylaws restructured, its enforcement mechanisms made transparent and accountable. The board could no longer act unilaterally or in secret. Every major decision required a recorded vote and homeowner approval. A week later, the state filed felony charges against Wynona and Gerald. Gerald took a plea deal and agreed to testify. Wynona didn't. Her trial date was set for the fall. She tried to make a statement to the press, but by then, no one was listening. Her reputation was unsalvageable. Her former allies had vanished, her name struck from every committee she once chaired. Her house was listed quietly, out-of-state buyers only. As for me, I added a few new items to the stand, a rotating selection of handmade goods from neighbors. Pottery, wood carvings, even a set of herbal teas someone brewed from her backyard garden. The stand had become a gathering place, a small knot of resistance that blossomed into something better. I didn't seek recognition. I didn't want a statue or a plaque. I just wanted what I'd always wanted, to grow things, to share what I made, and to be left alone by people who thought power gave them permission to ruin others. And now, finally, I had that. The land was quiet again. Not silent, just the right kind of noise. The hum of bees, the rustle of wind through trees, the faint clatter of jars being set down on a table. Not a nuisance. A life.